All right, so I'm going to talk about the service recovery paradox. I'm going to use it in the context of a community animal shelter. So, teaching the service recovery paradox with examples specifically for animal shelter adopters and volunteers, showing recovery strategies, the emotional impacts associated with those. So, first, we got to understand what is the service recovery paradox. So, the service recovery paradox, um, it shows up when failures lead actually to a better retention of customers and improves their loyalty. So, the service issue is quickly and effectively resolved. Staff's quick to apologize, they go above and beyond to make up for it. That creates a stronger bond than if the failure never happened in the first place. So, this paradox is especially relevant in settings where customer relationships are important, and I thought an animal shelter would be a good example to show that. So, first, we'll talk about the target audience for an animal shelter if I was teaching this concept to them. So, at an animal shelter, we've got people walking in to do adoptions. They're individuals or families that are looking to come in, find a dog or a cat. They often value the personal connection of the volunteers or staff there. They might be a little bit lost trying to figure out the whole process, and they might be a little bit emotional. It's a big decision. We also have got the shelter volunteers. It'd be good to have them trained up on these service recovery processes um, and the paradox so they can make sure that they're living up to standards that the shelter wants to have in place. The volunteers play a crucial role in supporting the shelter's operations. They show the animal care, they show the event organization. When it comes to fundraising, they're typically passionate about animal welfare. I'm going to go into that more in a second. Both the adopters, the volunteers, staff, they're going to value transparency. So this audience is going to look at transparency from the shelter regarding their animal care practices, the adoption processes. They want to feel confident that the decision in the animal that they're adopting is the right decision and that the animals are being well taken care of. That's going into my next point here, which is that the shelter has a commitment to humane treatment. That's going to be important to people coming in. They want to know that these animals are well taken care of, they're not abused, they're well fed, their health is being taken care of. It's a nurturing environment. And last but not least, they want to have a smooth adoption experience. That's important because it's part of the process for both the adopters and the volunteers. Nobody likes going into a process where it's a little bit wishy-washy. They don't know how things work. There's confusion. We want to have a positive community reputation for the shelter. So, going further into understanding the service recovery paradox. So, like I said, it occurs when recovery from the service failure is well executed. So, that results in the customer satisfaction level actually exceeding what would have happened if there was no failure at all. This works when the failures are seen as isolated. It's like a one off. That's usually the case when that paradox is going to pop up. And whoops, there's a little typo there, but that should say when the issues are seen as temporary. And this gives the chance for the recovery to result in a positive reassessment of the service. So let me see. I have a little example here where she's saying, we're giving free microchips to all the animals, so we're going to just need to change your adoption date. It's a little just a miss up in communication. It's not the end of the world. The service recovery is going to fail if the paradox isn't going to occur if the problems are seen as frequent or severe. The recovery response isn't enough to make up for that failure in the first place, and that's just going to lead to distrust in the whole business. So, successful recovery. The service recovery paradox, like I said, if it's seen as a one-off, that's going to increase the likelihood of some forgiveness there. But also, it needs to be quickly addressed. If a small issue occurs, the staff's quick to address it. they give what feels like a sincere apology, additional support to remedy that. That's what the customer needs to feel like they're being taken seriously, and that's what's going to result in that paradox, that stronger sense of loyalty. So it has to be rapid, it has to be thoughtful, it has to make up for and amend what the issue was. And that's going to leave the satisfaction beyond what the baseline would have been with no failure. Failed recovery. So like I said, systemic. If it's seen as it's like a repeated issue, if it's seen like it's not taken seriously, the response is slow, it's not going to work. That paradox isn't going to pop up. That's going to lead to negative feedback. They're probably not going to return. You're not going to get positive word of mouth. That's right. I have somebody rolling their eyes here. She's on her phone, not paying attention. This guy's sincerely apologizing. Okay, so let's give an example of this in an animal shelter environment. Small mix-up. It's a recoverable failure. So here's an example. An adoption case has a newly adopted dog's microchip paperwork, but it was mistakenly paired with another pet's file. This resulted in a 10-minute delay while they're waiting to get out of there. The situation serves an example of a recoverable failure. It's received as a small one-off glitch rather than a systemic issue. The staff is quick. They offer a quick, generous apology. They are communicating the whole time. They're having that transparency with the adopting family. What they end up doing is they waive the adoption fees. They send the family home with free dog food and treats for their new dog they adopted. The adopting family leaves blown away with the experience. What was a small little mistake was more than amended for, and staff owned up to it, and they felt appreciated. Why the recovery worked. First incident, it's seen as a little paperwork issue. It doesn't seem like a systemic issue. It seems like a fluke. There's no emotional, like heavy risk to animal welfare. That would be a way more serious issue in that type of environment. Like I said, staff was clear to communicate the issue. They apologized. They showed accountability. They sincerely apologized for the inconvenience caused. But they also add value recovery. They have value added recovery. So that's adding the fee waiver. They're waiving those adoption fees. They're sending dog food home with the family and treats. We're so sorry. Here, take this for the little guy. They're exceeding the adopter's expectations, and they're promoting goodwill, owning for their mistake. And now I will show you an example of when that recovery paradox would fail. Emotionally charged failures. So high severity failures like the endangering of an animal at the shelter, that would create a strong emotional reaction. That would make recovery extremely challenging. Also, weak initial response. When the initial response to failure is weak, it lacks sincerity. If people are dismissive, if the staff or volunteers are dismissive, that would lead to a loss of trust and confidence in customers. So I have her just kind of putting a fake smile on. He's kind of waving off whoever's at the desk. Also, like I said, systemic issues. It's not a one-off. It seems like the whole operation is poor procedures. It seems like you look at their Yelp reviews. This is a reoccurring thing for them. They're waving it off. They're obviously not addressing what's going on behind the scenes. So, to give an example of that, the promised pup that was vanished. A family's excitement turns to disappointment when they arrive to the shelter to adopt Biscuit, only to discover that he had already been adopted by someone else. The shelter messed up. They promised him to 2 different families. The shelter staff is dismissive and says they can find them a different dog. This incident's a clear example, so this is where the service recovery paradox wouldn't occur. The emotional investment of that family and the severe systemic issues, like there's no reason why they should be promising a dog to 2 separate families. There needs to be a process in place that would never allow that to occur. It's going to be really hard to recover from. Like I said, systemic again, something like that should never occur. They're dismissive. They're not owning it. There's no apology. Here, let's find a different dog. So key takeaways here. I think it's important to distinguish between issues. Volunteers, staff need to quickly decide, is this a minor hiccup that we can get into, or is this a significant failure? That's going to determine what the appropriate response in that situation is and what you can do to remedy it. That's going to be important to have the right recovery effort to maintain trust. Clear communication through the entire mess up. That's owning the problem, telling them why you messed up. That's going to reassure both the adopters and the volunteers. It's going to make them feel like they're valued, they're respected. You're being honest with them. Clear explanations about what went wrong, how you're going to fix this going forward. That goes a long way. And then over delivering on the recovery efforts, going above and beyond, offering personal touches. A thank you note goes a long way. Throwing in some freebies, some extras. That can turn that negative experience into a positive one, and that's going to get you loyalty, positive word of mouth going forward. And that's my presentation.